Welcome to Everyday Lessons in the Bible. Today I was in Daniel chapters 5 and 6. And King Nebuchadnezzar is gone, and King Belshazzar, his son, is now king. And back when Nebuchadnezzar was king, when they brought all the children of Israel into the Babylonian territory, they also took all the gold and the silver and things that were in the temple that are sacred and brought them to Babylon. And so the king is having a party, and he brings the gold and the silver and all of that stuff in there to use. And it is not meant for that. It is sacred utensils and things for the temple. And so God is not having that. And so a hand appears and writes on the wall. And so Belshazzar sees that. And he's like, oh my gosh, what is that? Of course, I'm sure everybody was freaking out. I know I would freak out. And so you've heard that saying before, the writing on the wall. And so they call for, nobody knows what it means. So they call for Daniel. And he says to him, I have heard of you that the spirit of the gods is in you, and that light and understanding and excellent wisdom is found in you. Now, don't you want that known about you? Don't you want, when people see you or know of you, that the light of God lives inside of you, and that you have understanding and excellent wisdom? I mean, that's what I want. I want, when people see me, to see God and to know that He lives inside of me. And so he's asking him to interpret what's being written on the wall, and that he's going to give him all these gifts and rewards and everything. And Daniel, he doesn't care anything about the rewards. And he tells them, you have not honored God. You have used the sacred elements for yourself, your own pleasure. And don't we do that sometimes? We take the gifts that God has given us and we use it for our own glory, our own self, instead of for God. I think about people that have all different kinds of talents, but the first one that comes to mind is singers. Singers that God has blessed them with a beautiful voice, but they use it for filth instead of for God's glory, or speaking truth and light and stuff over people. And so I just think we have to be careful with the gifts that God has given us. It's like, and I'll just touch briefly on it, the 7 mountains. You have the mountain of religion, but then you also have mountains of business and education and media and arts and stuff. And so, the talents that God has given you, they're not just meant to just be kept in the church. But if you're supposed to use your talents in like media or in the arts, like in music or whatever, you are to rise in that position, not shoving God down people's throats, because those people aren't going to receive that. But you are to rise in leadership, sharing with them the principles of the Word of God without having to say that. They will see that in you, and they will want what you have. And so God has called us to take the mountain, whatever mountain that is, and use your talents for that good, for His good. For your good and His glory, but it's all for the same thing. And when you can rise up in a position in a particular mountain and share with them the principles and the laws and the goodness of who God is, they will eventually see that and they'll want that. And so that's when we use what God has given us for the good of all. And so anyway, Daniel is asked to interpret what's on the wall, and it's Mene, Tekel, and Parsons. And so the interpretation is, God has numbered the days of your kingdom and brought it to an end. You have been weighed in the balances and found wanting. Your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians. And what's crazy to me is he's all excited because there's an interpretation to it. And I'm like, yeah, but do you not understand that you're fixing to be destroyed? And so he makes Daniel third ruler of the kingdom. And then that very night, the Medes come in and destroy him, and they take over the kingdom. And so then King Darius is now the king over them. And he makes Daniel one of the 3 high officials. And the satraps don't like that. They don't like that a Hebrew guy, is what I'm thinking, is over them. And so they decide to come up with a plot to take him out. And they know that Daniel goes and worships God 3 times a day. And so they come up with this crazy idea, and they get King Darius to agree to it without even, he doesn't have any idea that how this is going to impact Daniel. And it says that for 30 days, you cannot, worship any other god or man other than who, I guess Darius, for 30 days, except worship the king, worship him. And if you do, you're cast into the lion's den. And so he agrees, which is kind of weird. But anyway, he agrees. And so Daniel, who is not going to stop worshiping God because he knows who God is, and he's already seen God come through for him time and time again. And so I think for us, we have to remember how God has come through for us repeatedly in our lives. And so, and that's what you draw from. The next time you're faced with something, you draw from that as well. And so Daniel did not hesitate. He immediately went back to where he always worships and got on his knees and prayed to God. And then they saw him and brought him before the king. And the king was distraught because he was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Because I've signed this decree. I have to do this. But he didn't want to do that to Daniel. And so then he says to Daniel, may your God, whom you serve continually, deliver you. And so they put him in the lion's den, and the king went back and fasted all night long and did not sleep. And, I can't help but look at the imagery of how, like, Pontius Pilate didn't want to crucify Jesus, but the people did, and it just, you always see this repeat itself through the scriptures from beginning to end. It's always the same thing. You have these people that are against them. They take them into captivity. They try to destroy them. God saves them, restores them. It's the same theme that happens repeatedly. And I feel like all of it is to continually remind us and point us to God and know that Jesus saves and redeems, and that in the end, the same thing will happen again. And it's almost like it's there to keep reminding us to not give up and to learn. I always think we're supposed to learn. We're supposed to learn why people get stuck in these trials and they go through these things to keep us from doing it again. I just feel like we don't learn it, like the same things happen over and over again. And it's like we're not grasping it. And so the word of God is meant for us to learn and grow from. And so, of course, God saved Daniel from the lion's den, and the king was exceedingly glad and declared, our great God. And I just think about how, consequences. When you come against God's people, there are consequences. We as God's children cry out to God and know that He will save us from the people that come against us. But we also have to know that God it's His vengeance on those that come against you. It's not your vengeance, God's vengeance. When people come against you, you've got to let it go and let Him deal with them. And you just walk faithfully in who you are and who you're called to be. And so King Darius threw all them people into the lion's den and their families, in the lion's den. I mean, I would be upset if I was married to a person, that did that. But they threw their children, their wives, everybody into the lion's den that orchestrated this whole thing. And so God's vengeance, man, the consequences, right? The consequences. And so then the king made a decree, and he says, I make a decree that in all my royal dominion, people are to tremble and fear before the God of Daniel. Wow. Tremble and fear. You haven't seen really those words by a king, not even Nebuchadnezzar. until now. And I think that's so powerful. For he is the living God, enduring forever. His kingdom shall never be destroyed, and his dominion shall be to the end. He delivers and rescues. He works signs and wonders in heaven and on earth. He who has saved Daniel from the power of the lion's den. So, and then Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus, the Persian. And so, when we let God work through us, even in our trials, people are watching. And when they see our God move, it changes lives. Thank you for listening to Everyday Lessons in the Bible. I hope you have a blessed day. Please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel.